Let me get all of this set up. I'm still figuring this out. I want to run my intro. And then what I would like to do is I want to be clear. I'm not going to give a full history of John Money. If you guys want me to, please let me know, and I would be happy to. I'm operating under the assumption, though, that most of us know who John Money is. But I have some really interesting things that I've found, and well, this is my channel, so I'm just going to kind of bounce all over the place and hopefully be able to paint an appropriate picture. So here we go. Okay, hi. So glad if you're here. I still don't have the chat thing working, so if anybody is in the chat, thank you so much. I will message you afterwards. So, I've been talking a lot about the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, specifically Dr. Jolly West, as he was a board member at one point. And I was digging around in the archives the other day in the Wayback Machine. And so when you guys look up the False Memory Syndrome Foundation's website now, it still looks pretty old, pretty dated, but it doesn't show that there's a really old database with all the old newsletters. And I made a very interesting discovery. So, Mr. John Money is, I would argue, a very controversial individual. Some might argue criminal. But I'm not here to get into a debate about gender theory or anything like that, okay? And I'm also not going to talk about what he did to those kids because that's really kind of his claim to fame. Again, I'll come back on and do that if you guys would like, but it will have to be a request. So let me share this with you. And that is not the one that I want. There we go. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. So I have him highlighted, obviously. You guys will see me do that a lot, but I just want to pull this back up. So this is the original False Memory Syndrome Foundation's website. It gives a nice little breakdown here of all of the history, which I will be continuing to cover and kind of bounce around. I would highly encourage people to go and look this up, though. I really would. And if you'd like, I will post the link in a comment on YouTube and on Twitter. And you can just see all these, what I would call sob stories. So, right here, I wasn't specifically looking for John Money at all. Am I going to lie and say that I was surprised? Absolutely not. But it was here, and I figured, hey, let's talk about it. So, this says from England, Mr. Roger Scotford in late 1992 contacted Professor John Money, MD, at Johns Hopkins Medical Institutions to find out if he had ever heard of adult children cutting off all contact with their parents after claiming to have recovered repressed memories of childhood abuse. Dr. Money, who had heard about the FMSF, put Mr. Scotford in touch with this writer, who in turn put Mr. Scotford in touch with several other affected families in the UK. So there are false memory societies all over the world. I eventually would like to touch on some of the other ones. I didn't know that there were until recently. And I know that the British organization is still quite active. There's also one in Australia. And I don't know if all of you guys are on my Instagram, but I found a really fascinating 60 minutes little clip deep in the recesses of YouTube. And it was 60 Minutes Australia. The Defense of Mr. Bubbles. And in Australia, we sent over Mr. Ralph Underwager, who I have spoken about before, and he will get his own episode. But in this, the host is getting screamed at by Ralph Underwager, and Ralph Underwager is calling him a bastard because the host came here to interview him, and it was a case at a preschool, just like McMartin, just like Presidio, to a T. Identical, I would argue. And good on Australia, because they read the medical records right there on TV. I posted it on my Instagram. It's extremely graphic, but it's almost identical to the McMartin records and the Presidio records. Very violent. Okay. So this is who the False Memory Syndrome Foundation was. This is who they are. For the people who still adhere to this ideology, I'm not going to mince my words. Okay. I think that people have minced words long enough about false memory syndrome and the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. It is discussed in passivity almost. The harm is not acknowledged. And I'm tired of it. And I mean, whatever. It's my conscience at the end of the day, right? I have to live with my decisions. So now I'm going to show you guys. Let me pull this back up. And all right, let me go back over here because I would like to show you guys a really interesting place that I found Mr. Money. And he's right at the top. Color me surprised? I don't think so, but let's go ahead and pull it up. So, if you haven't heard of NAMBLA, welcome. Welcome to hell, I would argue. So this is the North American Man and Boy Love Association. And under the section of topics, and this was published in 2003, we have Mr. John Money. I'm going to read this quote. If I were to see the case of a boy aged 10 or 11 who's intensely erotically attracted towards a man in his 20s or 30s, if the relationship is totally mutual and the bonding is genuinely totally mutual, then I would not call it pathological in any way. Dr. John Money, Professor Emeritus of Medical Psychology at the Johns Hopkins University, in an interview in Paducah, yes, the same Paducah that Ralph Underwager was interviewed in the spring of 1991. Now, I want to click on something else over here, but I'm worried that it's not going to flow correctly. So I'm still figuring this out, guys. Let me pull up this other website. So there is a sexual offender treatment website, and Mr. Money also has some very interesting statements on here. Let me pull it up really quick. Here we go. Okay, so I would argue that this is who, really, besides what he did to those kids, this is who John Money is, okay? And this is what the False Memory Syndrome Foundation stood for. I'm being dead serious. Every single person that was on that board, anyone who supports individuals that were on that board and does not address this or speak out against this, okay? This is like the 7 degrees of separation, right? Except for it's involving the rotten fruit in a society that's not willing to look a very ugly problem in the face. Okay, let me pull this up. Okay, so this is the sexualoffendertreatment.org, and here's Mr. Money. Pursuing a number of fashionable but irredeemably divergent scientific tangents, John Money's 1980s through 1990s work contains a protracted but ill-fated attempt to capture erotic age orientation in broader than strictly forensic psychiatric frames. He bemoaned medicalization and pseudoscience. He advanced the speculative grand opponent process theory for what he called the paraphilias. So chronophilia was essentially Mr. Money's way of, I would argue, trying to sound smarter than everybody else, right? Trying to sound like he knows more. Make it sound scientific. Yeah? Sound familiar to anybody? Sorry, guys, but this topic really makes me mad. It really pisses me off. Excuse my language. I don't understand why people just can't call this crap out for what it is. Okay? Because the satanic panic isn't what you. If you think that the satanic panic wasn't real, I would like to inform you that that has not aged well, and I would argue that you are the victim of a disinformation campaign. Okay? You're believing what the news tells you and what Netflix tells you. I don't care how many documentaries there are out there about McMartin and the satanic panic. Okay? I don't. Because again, 60 Minutes Australia, Ralph Underwager, those medical records are on television. McMartin wasn't just McMartin. There was a preschool and there was a daycare and a couple other preschools. There was over 400 kids. Those medical records, almost identical. The same with the Presidio daycare. Nobody ever wants to talk about that stuff. They just want to talk about McMartin. Why? I don't know. Maybe because it was the longest, most expensive trial in United States history at the time. Nobody ever wants to talk about the fact that they put those kids through the longest pretrial hearing in United States history, which is what made it the most expensive trial in United States history. But, just keep believing what Netflix tells you to believe, right? Just keep believing the narrative. Seriously, these kids were victims. And is it really that far-fetched? No, it's not. It's absolutely not. And, everybody wants to demand facts from me. I have to have receipts. I have to have evidence. I think that I'm generally very good at that. But as far as this stuff goes, I'm not sitting here speculating. I know what I'm talking about. Anyways, so now I want to bring up one more person because I also found this very interesting. Let me pull. So I'm going to click between a couple of screens. I just have a couple more things to show you guys. So here. Okay. Now, I'm back on the False Memory Syndrome Foundation archive. So that paragraph that I read from Mr. Roger Scottford, so he was in England, right? So I was just looking him up because I found that quite interesting. And over here, Surviving the False Memory Wars Therapy Today. This article is from February of this year. Now, this author is addressing the British False Memory Syndrome Foundation. Now, it says here that he had to step down in 1998 when he supported the cult religion, the family, known for its abuse of children. Why did I find this interesting? I don't know if you've ever heard of the family. Guys, this thing is freezing on me. I don't know if you've ever heard of the family. So, the family used to be known as the Children of God. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Children of God. I've talked about it one time on Chris Graves' show, Digging with Chris Graves, my first interview with him. That was why I stopped watching true crime. I had a moment of cognitive dissonance, and I thought, are these true crime documentaries a way to get people to kind of like sympathize with the FBI and police in regards to these cases and make people think that something's getting done? That's a conversation for another day. But my point is, I was a huge fan of true crime. But the children of God was one of the most horrific things that I've ever seen. There are documentaries out there. They're really, really graphic. I would argue they border on the line of being completely inappropriate to be shown anywhere. But the children of God did rebrand themselves, and they were the family. And that is who the founder of the British False Memory Syndrome found. They supported. So let me pull this up really quick. Sorry, guys. I want to make sure that I have the right thing. Here we go. That's exactly what I'm looking for. Because I got to have my receipts, right? Nobody else has to. Everybody else can demand evidence, but I have to have receipts. So no problem. We'll play that game. Okay. All right. So, and I guess I'm just going to add all of these links. That way nobody gives me a hard time, but I'm only going to add it on YouTube, guys. So, right here, the British False Memory Society in the UK publicly supported Rachel and Gideon Scott, the UK family cult leaders, in the run-up to the wardship case judgment. Experience of gross sexual impropriety to which children in the organization had been exposed. And look who we have here. We have Pamela Frey, the mother of the daughter who accused her dad of abusing her, one of the founders of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. I posted a really interesting video on Twitter the other day where she gets a standing ovation. Mr. Ralph Underwager, his wife, Helita Wakefield, Mr. Roger Scottford, and eventually we're also going to talk about Richard Offshee. And then right over here, just so nobody thinks that I'm making this up, if you don't want to watch the documentary, the children of God, the family, they were a very, very, very large cult. And right here, the Family International, a church formerly known as the sex cult, the Children of God. Okay? And like I said, I'm not here to give a full dissertation about John Money. But yet again, I've made another tie from the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. Now it's British leg to John Money to the Children of God unexpectedly. But not surprising. Definitely not surprising. And in my previous video that I did, my previous stream, where I read from the radiation committee that Clinton set up in the NSA archives, where we have Martin Orne, who was on the False Memory Syndrome Foundation board, in the same sentence as Sidney Gottlieb, where they're talking about Bluebird and artichoke and radiation experiments and mind control experiments and sexual and physical abuse of children. I'm not going to mince words anymore, guys. I feel like I've been polite enough. Okay? Because there are just certain individuals that I have been coming across and people who still have not retracted their statement of calling me a liar. I would like an apology. I am not a liar. I am not a dangerous person, unless you have something to hide. And I'm not a spreader of disinformation or misinformation. Because eventually, I am going to do in a series with, a PowerPoint where I talk about McMartin and Presidio. And it's going to be rough. But I'm going to lay out my case because I'm not going to listen to this and I'm not going to be called a liar because I'm not, and I'm not dangerous. I would argue that people that ignore this kind of stuff are very dangerous, especially to children, especially to people who have left a cult, who are seeking help and support, who are vulnerable. That's what I would argue. So where's your receipts? Because I've yet to see anything that has absolved any of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation board members. Literally anything. All I have found is some really damning evidence. And more. I wasn't expecting to find that stuff in the NSA archives about Martin Orne and Sidney Gottlieb, Jolly West Piers, involved with kids in Bluebird and Artichoke. I don't care about Manson. Someone does. But I don't. Not right now. I will get back to him because we're going to be talking about the Process Church of the Final Judgment in its full name. Because there's a lot of weird timing with all of this stuff in the process as well. But I digress because I could sit here and be petty all day. Because I've been attacked. I've been disrespected. No statements of retraction have been made. But you know what? It's okay. It's fine. Because I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to keep making my argument. And I'm going to get to a point, I don't know what point that will be, where I'm going to come on here and I'm going to name at least 3 individuals specifically that I am talking to and that I have been talking to since I started streaming. Actually, I'll name 4. 4. I'm going to name 4 very specific individuals in a very specific community. One who has called me a liar and a dangerous person and a spreader of misinformation. And after I lay all of this out, I am going to ask you if you would like to come on and debate me. I don't care how small my channel is. I'm on Tony's channel. You guys can come talk to me there. And I want you to address this. Because I'm sorry. False memory syndrome isn't real. That has been debunked. Someone tried to tell me that the satanic panic has been debunked. No. This has all been debunked. And I would argue that the video that I posted of Miss Pamela Frade getting a standing ovation at the False Memory Syndrome Foundation meeting, when everybody stands up and everybody starts standing up and she's overwhelmed. She's taken aback and she even says it. I would argue that you are looking at a room full of adult criminals who see their savior, their way out. That's what you're looking at. So you need to address this, okay? Because Jolly wasn't a saint. Margaret Singer wasn't a saint. Anybody that was on this board has some atoning to do. And they may not be here now, but all these little proselytizers out here, well, you say that you're so proud of them and that they're your heroes. So it's time for you to show me the receipts. I'm sorry. I'm not going to play these games anymore. And again, I would like an apology. I am a lady. I understand that I may kind of look a little felonious with my knuckle tattoos and my face tattoo, but I don't care. I'm a lady. And I didn't lie. And I'm not dangerous. But I am making the argument that you are. Okay?